The aliens' dismissal of humanity, the Council of the Zolarians, an advanced alien species, sat around a grand table in their spaceship, orbiting a distant planet. They were the rulers of the galaxy, the most powerful beings known to all. Their empire spanned across countless star systems, and they had encountered many species, each more advanced than the last. Yet, there was one planet they had never considered a threat, Earth. As the Zolarian leaders gathered for their regular meeting, the topic of Earth came up. "Why waste our time with humans?" said Vather, the lead strategist. "They are primitive, emotional, and have barely mastered the technology of flight. Their home planet is filled with chaos and violence. It's a waste to even consider them a real threat." The others nodded in agreement, their laughter echoing through the chamber. "Yes," said Zither, the Council's chief scientist. "Their greatest weapon is their instinct to fight, but they don't even have the ability to harness energy from their own sun efficiently. What could they possibly do to stand against us?" Vather leaned forward, his eyes glowing with confidence. "We can easily conquer their planet and strip it of its resources. Their technological limitations will ensure no resistance. We'll sweep through their defenses, and in a matter of weeks, Earth will be ours." The Council members exchanged amused looks. They had encountered species far more dangerous than the humans, and those had been no match for the might of the Zolarians. Humans, in their eyes, were nothing but a footnote in the vast history of the galaxy, a species far too insignificant to ever pose a real threat. But Zither hesitated, his voice laced with caution. "There are rumors from our scouts that these humans are unpredictable. They've survived wars and environmental disasters. Could this be an indication of hidden strength?" The room grew quiet. For a moment, Vather chuckled, brushing off the concern. "Unpredictable? Perhaps. But that's simply the nature of their chaos. They fight with no real strategy. Their emotions drive them. They'll break under pressure, just like every other species we've encountered." "We've been wrong before," said Zither quietly. "Remember the Dracorians? They were under our radar until they launched a surprise attack on our flagship. Could humanity possess the same unpredictable trait?" Vather shook his head dismissively. "Not possible. These humans, with their tiny minds, even smaller weapons, will crumble the moment we step onto their soil. The real question is not whether we will win, but how soon we can complete the invasion and move on to richer planets." The Council agreed. Plans for the invasion were set in motion. Earth would be invaded, not with full force, but with a small squadron of Zolarians. They would test the humans, observe their reactions, and then begin the extraction of resources. They underestimated humanity completely. The Zolarians assumed it would be an easy conquest. Meanwhile, on Earth, in a small remote military base, in the northern part of the planet, a group of soldiers sat around a table, laughing. They had heard the news of an incoming alien fleet. The media had labeled it a threat, but the soldiers weren't convinced. "Aliens?" one of them snorted. "If they really thought they could take us down, they wouldn't need to sneak around. Just look at their ships. They're outdated, almost like they're trying to hide from us." Another soldier, named Captain James, stood up and pointed to a satellite image on the screen. "It's not the ships that are the problem, it's the unknown. We don't know what they're capable of. Don't underestimate them just because they look weak." But the rest of the team laughed. "Come on, we've got weapons that can obliterate a tank from miles away. What are they going to do? Shoot us with laser pointers?" Captain James sighed, shaking his head. "It's not about the technology, it's about what they want. They could be after our resources or worse, our people." The team brushed off his concerns, still laughing and making jokes. They didn't believe that any aliens could challenge the human spirit. After all, humanity had survived everything from wars to natural disasters. What could these aliens possibly do to threaten them? At that very moment, The Zolarian fleet moved into Earth's atmosphere, their ships cloaked and nearly invisible to Earth's primitive radar systems. They were making their way toward the planet, convinced that this would be an easy victory. As the Zolarians prepared to make their move, they remained unaware of the one thing that could change everything: the resilience of the human spirit. While the aliens plotted their conquest, humans, in their unpredictable ways, began preparing for something that would surprise even the most seasoned of soldiers. Unseen by the alien invaders, small, everyday people began to form alliances. They weren't prepared to lose their homes so easily, and so the stage was set. The Zolarians would arrive thinking that humanity was an easy target, but the moment they stepped onto Earth's surface, they would realize they had made a grave mistake. The humans, in their simplest forms, were not the ones to be mocked. They would rise in ways the Zolarians never saw coming. The first strike, the Zolarians arrived in Earth's atmosphere under the cover of night, cloaked in darkness, their ships almost invisible to the naked eye. The alien fleet descended over a quiet, remote town, far from the major cities, far from the eyes of the media. They had chosen this spot intentionally. No major defense systems, no army standing guard, just the perfect opportunity to begin their invasion. It was meant to be swift, efficient, and most importantly, uncontested. As their ships touched down in an open field, the Zolarians emerged, their cold, metallic bodies gleaming under the moonlight. They were confident, believing that their advanced technology would give them the upper hand. Their laser rifles hummed as they began their silent march toward the nearest civilian structures, their footsteps muffled by the soft earth beneath them. But what the Zolarians didn't know was that this seemingly quiet town had an unassuming secret. It was home to a group of veterans, ordinary people who had once served in various branches of the military. They were retired now, but they never stopped training, never stopped preparing for the unknown. And when the alarm went off in the middle of the night, they knew instantly that this was no natural disaster. Captain James, who had sensed something was wrong before, gathered his old team in the town's defense shelter. The soldiers were on edge, but they had trained for moments like this. They weren't sure what they were up against, but one thing was certain: they wouldn't go down without a fight. "We've got less than an hour to prepare," Captain James said, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "They've got the advantage in numbers, but we've got the home ground. We know this terrain better than they ever will. Let's put everything we've got into stopping them." One by one, they moved swiftly, checking weapons, setting up traps, and placing defensive positions around the town. While the Zolarians expected to face no resistance, they were in for a rude awakening. The human soldiers were making use of the environment, using it to their advantage, something the aliens hadn't anticipated. As the first alien scouts made their way into the town, they were met with an eerie silence, the kind that seemed unnatural in such a normally bustling place. The Zolarians were puzzled, their scanners showing no signs of human activity. But as they moved deeper, they didn't notice the tripwires or the strategically placed explosives hidden in the shadows of buildings and alleyways. The first strike came as a shock to the invaders. A Zolarian scout was walking past an abandoned storefront when the sound of a sharp snap echoed through the air. Before it could react, an explosion rocked the area, sending the alien flying through the air, its body twisted in an unnatural way. The human soldiers had set their traps, and the first casualty was theirs. The Zolarian fleet commander, Krauf, received the news in disbelief. His scouts had fallen into a trap, and the town they were meant to easily conquer had put up an unexpected resistance. "This can't be," Krauf muttered under his breath. "They should have been helpless, weak. It's impossible." But the humans weren't done yet. Captain James and his team had expected to face more of the same. But they had done the one thing the aliens hadn't accounted for. They fought back with a ferocity no one, least of all the invaders, could imagine. The human soldiers weren't afraid of dying, and that made them unpredictable from hidden vantage. points, the humans launched a barrage of projectiles, rockets, homemade grenades, and even firebombs. Each blast struck with perfect accuracy, rattling the alien forces. The Zolarians, now realizing they had underestimated their opponents, scrambled to regroup, but it was too late. The humans had taken the initiative, forcing the invaders to fight on their terms. Kralf's fleet was now in chaos. His soldiers, skilled and well-equipped as they were, found themselves surrounded by the unexpected humans who knew their land, who fought without hesitation, who took advantage of every second of confusion. The aliens who had believed themselves to be unstoppable were beginning to falter. "What's happening?" Kralf demanded, his voice tinged with frustration. "Why are we being overwhelmed by these creatures?" His second-in-command, Zila, attempted to reassure him, though even she could see the cracks in their plan. "They are fighting back harder than we anticipated. It's not just their weapons, it's their will to survive. We must adapt. We cannot allow this to continue." The Zolarian soldiers began to retreat, but Captain James wasn't about to let them escape. He knew this was their only chance. "Don't let them regroup," he ordered. "We fight to win. We can't let them see the full extent of our power just yet." The battle raged on for hours, the sound of explosions and gunfire ringing through the night air. The Zolarians were used to being the predators, but now, for the first time, they were the prey, and just as Kralf was preparing to call for reinforcements, a single human soldier stood in the midst of the chaos, holding his ground, with eyes locked onto the advancing alien forces. He wasn't the most powerful, nor the most equipped, but his sheer determination sent a message loud and clear to the invaders. "You've made a mistake underestimating us." In this unexpected, brutal fight, humanity had made one thing clear. They would not go down without a fight. The Zolarians had underestimated the strength of the human spirit, and it was a mistake they would soon regret. Humanity unleashed. The first battle had been just the beginning. Earth's defenders, ordinary men and women, soldiers and civilians, had shown the Zolarians that they weren't as weak as they seemed. But the true test of humanity's strength was still ahead. And for the first time in history, humanity would unite like never before. As news of the alien attack spread, the world's nations scrambled to respond. Governments that had once been divided by borders, politics, and ideologies were now bound together by a common cause: survival. Across continents, humans began to realize something that the Zolarians had failed to understand. Humanity's true weapon was its unity. In underground bunkers, makeshift command centers, and crowded streets, people from all walks of life prepared to fight. From scientists to farmers, from teachers to athletes, everyone had a role to play. They may not have had the advanced technology of the Zolarians, but they had something far more powerful: their resourcefulness, their heart, and their will to protect what they loved. Captain James, now leading a coalition of human forces, stood at the front of a new makeshift headquarters in an abandoned skyscraper. The city below was filled with chaos, yet there was a sense of purpose in the air. This was no longer just a battle for survival. It was a battle for the future of humanity. "Listen up," James said, his voice steady despite the weight of the situation. "We've shown them that we're not easy prey. But that's just the start. We need to hit them where it hurts. Their technology, their power, their pride, all of it can be broken. But only if we fight smart. We don't need to beat them. With strength, we'll outthink them." Around him, soldiers and civilians alike nodded in agreement. They had already adapted to the alien invasion in ways the Zolarians never could have predicted. They had learned to fight not just with weapons, but with tactics, with knowledge, and with heart. Meanwhile, across the globe, ordinary people took to the streets, building crude defenses, setting traps, and repurposing whatever they could find to create weapons of war. Communities that had once been divided now worked as one. Doctors became medics on the front lines, teachers became strategists, And farmers used their knowledge of the land to create elaborate defenses, even the world's. Technology, once thought to be outclassed by the Zolarians, was now being repurposed and adapted. Humans had learned quickly how to reverse engineer some of the alien technology captured during the initial skirmishes. While they couldn't match the Zolarian ships, they found ways to disrupt their communications, scramble their weapons, and create improvised countermeasures. Back at the human command center, James looked over a map of the area, marking strategic points. "The Zolarians have underestimated us," he said, turning to his team. "They thought we were just an unruly species with no real organization. But we've proven that when it comes to survival, we're unpredictable. We'll use that too. Our advantage." His plan was bold. Instead of directly confronting the Zolarians with brute force, he would strike at their weaknesses. Their advanced technology could be their downfall. The Zolarians had no idea how to fight a species so adept at adapting, changing, and improvising. The first part of the plan was to create chaos in their ranks. James ordered a group of elite human soldiers to infiltrate Zolarian supply lines and sabotage their operations. Armed with only basic gear and knowledge of their surroundings, these soldiers would sneak behind enemy lines and plant devices that would disrupt Zolarian weapon systems. It was a dangerous mission, but it was the only way to level the playing field. The Zolarians had no idea what was coming. They were so focused on their superiority, on their technology, that they failed to recognize the one thing that made humans so dangerous: their ability to adapt, to think on their feet, to turn anything into a weapon of war. Meanwhile, in the heart of Zolarian-held territory, another group of humans was preparing for a different kind of mission. These weren't soldiers or elite operatives. They were just civilians, teachers, farmers, and shopkeepers who had banded together to launch an attack on a Zolarian power core. Using makeshift explosives and basic engineering, they had somehow managed to infiltrate the alien base, unnoticed by the advanced alien sensors. Their goal? To shut down a critical part of the Zolarian supply chain. As they approached the power core, they heard the unmistakable hum of Zolarian energy shields blocking their path. But the humans, undeterred, had a plan of their own. They had studied the Zolarian technology and found a weakness. By using reflective materials from a nearby scrapyard, they rigged a device that would blind the alien sensors long enough for them to reach the core. And they did it. Against all odds, these civilians, with nothing but their resourcefulness and determination, disabled the power core. The shockwave that followed disrupted Zolarian communications across the region. It was a small victory, but it sent a clear message: humanity would never be broken. On Zolarian ships above Earth, Krauf paced back and forth in disbelief. His fleet was struggling. Their superior technology was being outmaneuvered at every turn. It was unlike anything he had ever encountered before. These humans, they learn too fast, he muttered. They adapt too quickly. The Zolarians were caught off guard, their once unstoppable forces now in disarray. They had underestimated humanity's power to rise in the face of adversity. And now, the real war had just begun. The ultimate battle begins. The skies above Earth had become a battleground. For weeks, the Zolarians had confidently scoured the planet, striking from the shadows, believing that humanity's desperation would eventually force them to submit. But as the invaders pushed forward, they quickly realized that the humans they had underestimated were capable of far more than they had imagined. The war was no longer a distant possibility, it was happening now. And humanity was fighting back like a storm. The first major assault from the Zolarians came in the early hours of a crisp autumn morning, as their advanced warships pierced the atmosphere, unleashing a devastating barrage of plasma fire. Cities crumbled, forests were set aflame, and the ground shook under the force of their weapons. But even in the face of destruction, the humans were not paralyzed by fear. They were fueled by something the Zolarians could never comprehend. deep, instinctual need to protect their home. Captain James and his team had already anticipated the Zolarian onslaught. They weren't waiting for the aliens to attack. Instead, they had prepared the ground for a decisive counteroffensive. The human forces, now better equipped and more coordinated than ever, were ready. As the first Zolarian bombardment landed, the humans retaliated with everything they had. Underneath the alien ships, miles of underground tunnels hidden from the enemy came to life. These tunnels were once used for mundane civilian purposes, but now they had been transformed into a labyrinth of resistance. Out of these hidden depths emerged human war machines, crude but effective tanks and armored vehicles that had been modified with scavenged alien technology. The Zolarians had expected to crush any resistance with ease. But now, as their ships descended into Earth's atmosphere, they were greeted not by a shattered world, but by a well-organized force fighting for its survival. The humans had adapted, taken their tools and knowledge, and turned them into weapons of defiance. A Zolarian General Zither watched as his fleet struggled to gain ground. Despite their overwhelming technological advantage, they found themselves at a standstill. These humans are like roaches scurrying around, using everything they have to fight back. Zither growled, his eyes flashing with frustration. Why? Won't they break? We should have wiped them out in the first wave. What we're dealing with isn't just resistance. Krauf, the fleet commander, responded. His face was grim. These humans are fighting with something we can't predict. It's their survival instinct. They fight to protect what they love. It's unfamiliar. Meanwhile, Captain James stood on the front lines, his eyes fixed on the battlefield. The air was thick with smoke, and the sound of explosions filled the atmosphere. But amidst the chaos, he saw something that filled him with hope: the unity of humanity. He knew the odds were stacked against them, but he had never seen people more willing to lay down their lives for one another. The Zolarian ships were losing altitude. The humans had created an electromagnetic pulse weapon that, though crude, was effective enough to disrupt the aliens' communication systems. This had thrown the Zolarian fleet into confusion, and now their ships were easy targets for the humans' makeshift anti-aircraft missiles. James raised his fist. Now's our chance, he shouted. We've got them on the ropes. Don't let up. Push them back. His orders were met with a deafening roar of agreement from the human soldiers, who surged forward with renewed strength. Every human in the fight knew the stakes. They were fighting not only for themselves, but for the future of the entire planet. They had already lost so much, but they would not lose without making sure the Zolarians knew what it meant to face the human spirit. The human forces launched their final push against the alien invaders. Armed with alien weaponry they had scavenged and adapted, they tore through the streets, striking with precision and power. With each alien ship they brought down, the morale of the humans soared higher, while the Zolarian forces began to falter. The once dominant invaders were now on the defensive. In the midst of the chaos, a small group of human engineers worked tirelessly, unlocking one of the greatest surprises of all, an alien power core they had captured earlier in the war. It was a dangerous gamble. They were going to use the core to create an energy surge strong enough to disable the alien warships. The humans knew it was a one-time shot, but if they succeeded, it could change everything. As the engineers prepared, the final detonator, Zolarian warships circled above them, firing relentless blasts. The tension was unbearable. We don't have much time, one of the engineers shouted, sweat pouring down his face. If we don't do this now, we'll never get another chance. With the alien forces closing in, the human soldiers fought with everything they had. But it was the engineers' final push that would turn the tide. As they activated the power core, an explosion of energy surged across the battlefield, lighting up the night sky. The alien ships above shuddered as their systems went dark. For the first time in the entire war, The humans had gained the upper hand. The Zolarians, now scrambling to regain control, had no idea how to respond. The sudden loss of power left them vulnerable, and the humans took full advantage. Ships were brought down, communication systems were sabotaged, and human forces pressed forward with an unrelenting drive to end the invasion. Kralth, watching from his command ship, could hardly believe what he was witnessing. His once proud fleet was falling apart before his eyes. No. This can't be happening, he muttered in disbelief. How are they doing this? James, standing on Earth's surface amidst the destruction, looked up at the sky. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time, he felt a sense of victory. Humans had shown the universe that they would never back down. As the final ships fell from the sky, humanity stood tall, battered but unbroken. The Zolarians had learned a painful lesson. They had underestimated humanity's power. And now humanity had proven that they were not the weak, helpless creatures the aliens had once thought them to be. They were warriors. And the war was far from over. A change of heart. The Zolarian fleet had been broken. Their weapons disabled, their ships falling from the sky, and their once imposing forces scattered across Earth's surface. The humans had done the impossible, what no other species could do. They had pushed back the Zolarians. Yet, as the last of the alien warships tumbled from the heavens, a strange tension hung in the air. The battlefield was littered with debris, the echoes of explosions still reverberating in the distance. But the war was far from over. Kral, the Zolarian fleet commander, stood at the command center of his damaged flagship, staring out at the carnage below. The monitors before him flashed with images of his broken forces, their once pristine ships now reduced to wreckage. His hands gripped the console in front of him as the weight of his failure settled on his shoulders. We've been outmatched, he said quietly, his voice tinged with disbelief. Beside him, his second-in-command Zyla remained silent for a long moment before speaking. We can still regroup, sir. If we retreat and call for reinforcements, we might— No. Kralth interrupted, his voice hard. We've underestimated them. We thought they were weak. We thought they would break under our might. But these humans, they're unlike anything we've faced. Their resolve, their ingenuity. I've never seen anything like it. They don't give up no matter what we throw at them. Zyla looked at him, her expression torn. So what now? Do we surrender? Kralth didn't answer right away. His mind was swirling with the weight of their failure, but more importantly, with something else. There was a nagging feeling in the back of his mind, a thought that refused to leave. It wasn't just that humans had fought back. It was that, in a strange way, they had earned his respect. In all his years of conquest, he had never encountered a species so driven, so willing to sacrifice everything for their survival. There was something about their spirit that spoke to him. Something that made him question everything he had ever believed about strength and power. I don't know, Kralth murmured. But perhaps we need to reconsider our approach. Meanwhile, on the ground, the humans celebrated their hard-fought victory, but they knew better than to think the war was over. Captain James, standing amidst the ruins of a once thriving city, looked out over the battlefield. His soldiers, exhausted but proud, were regrouping. But even in their triumph, there was an understanding. They were not out of danger yet. The Zolarians would not give up so easily. Let's take a breath, James said, his voice calm yet authoritative. But don't get comfortable. We've won the first round, but there's more to come. We need to be ready. As the humans worked to consolidate their defenses and repair their damaged equipment, a different kind of strategy began to take shape. The global leadership knew the Zolarians weren't going to leave without a fight. But what if they could? Do something the aliens didn't expect? What if they could show the invaders that, despite the war, humanity still had the power to choose mercy? Across the battlefield, a message was sent out. It wasn't a challenge. It wasn't a threat. It was a simple transmission from Earth's leaders to the Zolarian fleet. "We are willing to talk." Captain James, along with a team of diplomats and military strategists, was selected to be the human representative in these discussions. The decision was met with some resistance. Many soldiers were eager for the final strike, ready to crush the aliens completely. But James saw something others didn't. This was their chance to end the conflict without further bloodshed. As the communications between Earth and the Zolarian fleet were established, Kralf hesitated. He had never considered diplomacy as an option. His kind didn't negotiate, they conquered. But this was different. For the first time, he found himself looking at the humans not as weak prey, but as worthy opponents. Perhaps, he thought, there was more to this fight than just victory. With a heavy heart, he agreed to the meeting, but only on the condition that it would be held in neutral space, away from both human and Zolarian-controlled territories. Terms were set, and a convoy of ships from both sides made their way to a distant moon where the talks would take place. As Captain James stood in the human delegation ship, preparing for the meeting, he couldn't help but feel a mix of hope and uncertainty. He had never imagined that one day, humans would be sitting at the negotiation table with an alien species. But here they were, on the brink of peace or the brink of war once more. "We're not just fighting to survive anymore," James said to his team, looking out at the vast expanse of space. "We're fighting for a future where we can coexist, where we're more than just conquerors or victims. We're fighting for something bigger than ourselves." The meeting on the distant moon began with tense silence. But as the Zolarian delegation, led by Kralf, entered the chamber, something unexpected happened. Kralf's gaze met James's, and for the first time, both men saw each other not as enemies, but as equals, two beings caught in a larger conflict, both struggling to find their place in a chaotic universe. "We have fought, and we have bled," Kralf began, his voice calm but heavy. "And yet, you still stand. I did not expect this from your species, but I find myself curious. Perhaps we should discuss a different path forward. One where both of our peoples can exist together." The room fell into silence as the two leaders spoke, strange, unspoken respect hanging between them. The battle was over, but the war had taken on a new dimension. What began as a fight for survival was now a fight for understanding, a fight not just for victory, but for the future of two species who had never expected to share a galaxy. The final showdown, the moon was shrouded in an eerie, cold silence as the human and Zolarian delegation stood face to face in the vast chamber. The air was thick with tension. What had started as a desperate battle for survival had now led to a fragile truce, but the true test was still ahead. Neither side trusted each other entirely, and the threat of war still loomed. The negotiations on neutral ground had been an unexpected turn of events, but neither humanity nor the Zolarians could avoid the brutal reality that the only way forward was through a final confrontation, one that would decide their fate. Captain James, standing at the head of the human delegation, glanced at his team. Every person in the room understood the gravity of the situation. The Zolarians had fought with unmatched strength, yet humanity had pushed back with equal ferocity. But now they were caught in a delicate balance. The choice was no longer about military might, but about the heart of their conflict, whether the two species could ever truly coexist. Kralf, the Zolarian commander, stood across the room, flanked by his most trusted officers. His once confident demeanor had been replaced by uncertainty. The once immovable Zolarian Empire was no longer the all-powerful force it once believed itself to be. The battle with humans had shattered his faith in their superiority. And yet, there was something else gnawing at him, an undeniable respect for the humans he had once thought to be insignificant. "I did not expect this," Kralf began, his voice low and steady, his eyes meeting James's. "We came to Earth thinking it would be an easy conquest, a mere stepping stone in our galactic expansion. We mocked your species, thinking you were weak. But now I see strength in you that I have never seen in any other species, a strength I could never have imagined." James looked up at Krauth, the weight of the words settling between them. He nodded slowly, understanding the unspoken message. The Zolarian leader had come to respect humanity, not just for its ability to fight, but for its resilience, its capacity to adapt and survive against the odds. "We fought for our home," James replied, his voice steady, "not just for survival, but for our future. We may not have your technology, but we have something you don't: unity, determination, and an unbreakable will to protect what we hold dear." The chamber was quiet, save for the low hum of the power generators in the walls. The atmosphere was thick with the weight of their conversation. It was as if both species stood on the edge of a precipice, where one wrong move could send them tumbling into chaos. But then, something happened. It wasn't a shift in words or a dramatic revelation, it was a shift in understanding. A silent realization that this war, this fight, could only end in one of two ways: mutual destruction or mutual survival. The question was, could two species so different find common ground? Krauth's expression softened for the briefest of moments before he spoke again. "Perhaps it is time we stop fighting for dominance and instead fight for something else, for the opportunity to coexist. But the choice will not be easy." James stood taller now, his voice carrying the weight of humanity's resolve. "The choice isn't just about survival, Krauth. It's about building something together. If you can leave the past behind, if we can both find a way forward, there's hope for more than just peace. There's a chance to rebuild this galaxy, one where we both have a place." Krauth turned toward his officers who had been listening intently. They were skeptical, their alien faces unreadable, but Krauth's eyes held a spark of something different, something rare for a Zolarian. Could peace truly be possible? Could they step away from the bloodshed, from the centuries of conquest, and instead forge a path of cooperation? "I never thought I would hear a human speak of peace in such a way," Zither, the Zolarian chief, strategist, muttered. "But you speak of something more than survival. You speak of the future." Krauth nodded. "We've been blinded by our own pride. But now, I see that perhaps it is not the conquest that defines strength, but the willingness to change. Perhaps we've been wrong." The tension in the room began to ease. The Zolarians, once resolute in their belief that only through war could they maintain their empire, now found themselves questioning everything they had been taught. Could peace really be an option? Could they lay down their weapons and start anew? James, sensing the shift, stepped forward. "It won't be easy, but it will be worth it. The future is uncertain, but if we don't take this chance, we may never get another one. Earth will stand as an example, not of conquest, but of what happens when two species choose to rise above their differences." Krauth's gaze remained fixed on James for a long moment. Then, with a slow nod, he spoke once more. "Perhaps the time for war has passed. Let's see what we can build together." And so, as the sun began to set on the moon, casting long shadows across the barren landscape, the final decision was made. The war had reached its end, not with the clash of weapons, but with the realization that survival alone wasn't enough. They needed to evolve, to grow, to become something greater than their past. The future, fragile as it was, lay in their hands. The final showdown was not fought on the battlefield, but in the hearts of two species who had learned, through sacrifice and loss, that the greatest strength lay not in domination, but in understanding and cooperation. As Captain James and Krauth walked side by side, the moonlight casting long shadows behind them, they knew that the true war had ended and a new era had begun. The aftermath, a new era for humanity. The war was over. The smoke that had once darkened the skies began to clear, revealing a world forever changed. Earth, scarred by battles and loss, now stood on the precipice of something new. The humans, who had fought so fiercely, so relentlessly, now faced the aftermath, the world they had saved, but also the world they would need to rebuild. In the months that followed, Earth underwent a profound transformation. The ceasefire between the Zolarians and humanity held, not just because of treaties or agreements, but because both species had witnessed the same thing. Humanity's resilience was not just in their ability to fight, but in their ability to heal, to adapt, and to move forward. Captain James stood at the helm of a new mission. As the leader of Earth's united forces, he was not only a symbol of the victory against the Zolarians, but also of the future they were now building together. The remnants of the war still lingered, the broken cities, the lost lives, but there was a sense of purpose, a shared goal that united humanity and their new alien allies. The first steps toward reconciliation were tentative. Zolarian diplomats, once prideful and aloof, now sat across from Earth's leaders in meetings not just about peace, but about collaboration. Technologies were exchanged, knowledge shared, and the alien race that had once looked down on humans now acknowledged them as partners. It was an uneasy alliance, but an alliance nonetheless. The rebuilding of Earth was as much about healing the hearts of its people as it was about rebuilding the cities. Humans, once divided by borders, by nations, and by politics, had come together in the face of a common enemy. Now they faced the task of building a future where those differences were no longer barriers, but strengths. Captain James worked alongside Zolarian engineers to help repair the broken cities, sharing resources, expertise, and manpower. The once impossible task of regrowing the world seemed more attainable than ever. But beyond the cities, in the wilderness, there was a different kind of rebirth. Forests began to regrow. Rivers that had been polluted during the conflict slowly began to heal, and the earth itself, like its people, began to recover. The humans who had fought to save their planet now dedicated themselves to preserving it. They worked not only to restore what had been lost, but to build something sustainable for the future, a planet that could thrive in harmony with its new allies. Yet, even with all the progress, the scars of war remained. The faces of those who had lost loved ones, the ruins of once proud buildings, and the lingering memories of the battles fought. The cost of survival was a heavy one. But it was a cost that humans had paid with unwavering courage. Kral, now an ambassador for the Zolarian people on Earth, walked through the streets of a rebuilt city. The alien leader, once so sure of his species' superiority, had changed. He had seen what humanity was capable of, not just in war, but in peace. He saw it in the children who played together, human and Zolarian alike, in the markets where both species exchanged goods, and in the research centers where their combined knowledge created new technologies that would benefit both worlds. Spoke with Captain James, walking through the streets where humans and aliens worked side by side. "I never thought it would come to this," Krauth admitted. "I thought we would crush your species, take your planet, and move on to the next. But now I see that this partnership is the future. The universe is vast, but it's nothing without cooperation." James nodded, his gaze focused on the horizon, where the sun began to rise over a new day. "It's not just about survival anymore, Krauth. It's about what we do after, what we choose to build with the pieces left behind. It's about understanding that the strength we need doesn't come from victory in battle, but from the ability to rise again together." The two leaders stood there in silence, watching the dawn break over a world that had been torn apart and reborn. The alien ships, once harbingers of destruction, now landed alongside human spacecraft, not in conquest, but in collaboration. War was over, but the real work was just beginning. The promise of peace, fragile as it was, had been forged in the fires of war. And now, humanity and the Zolarians were working side by side to create something new. As the days turned into months, and the months into years, the alliance between Earth and the Zolarians grew stronger. Their combined efforts not only rebuilt the war-torn cities, but also created new ones that stood as symbols of unity, strength, and a shared vision for the future. They established new trade routes, new cultural exchanges, and new opportunities for both species to learn from each other. The scars of the past would never fully disappear, but humanity had shown the universe that they were more than just survivors. They were builders. They were creators. And most of all, they were partners. The story of the war, of the battles fought and the lives lost, would be remembered, but it would no longer define them. Instead, what would define humanity in the eyes of the universe was their ability to rise from the ashes of conflict and forge a new path, one where enemies could become allies, and where the future could be shaped not by domination, but by cooperation. The universe had underestimated humans once, but it would never make that mistake again.